Welcome back to the CreaTech stage at the cogX Hybrid Festival 2021, co-curated with the UK Creative Industries Council, a forum between government and industry which brings together all sectors of the creative industries, from film to fashion, advertising to architecture, games to music, performance to publishing. You can find out more about us at thecreativeindustries.co.uk. I'm Janet Hull, and I lead the CreaTech programme for the Creative Industries Council. And I'm also Director of Marketing Strategy at the IPA, and it's my pleasure to be your MC for today. We've got a fantastic session coming up. Please share your thoughts and comments and get to know each other in the chat, and ask questions of the panelists through the Q&A. And on your social, please use the hashtags CreaTechUK and cogX 2021. Our next session title is UK CreaTech R&D, the Network Effect. You may remember the CIC CreaTech report from TechNation launched on Monday. We're delighted now to introduce a second piece of very important CreaTech research for the Creative Industries Council. In this next session, we'll be hearing about emerging findings from a major new project from the Creative Industries Policy and Evidence Centre, PEC for short, which is commissioned by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, ARHC for short, which uses open data and data science methods to identify research trends, actors and networks at the technological cutting edge of the UK's creative industries. A big welcome to Professor Andrew Chitty, Challenge Director, Audience of the Future and Creative Industries Clusters Programme at UKRI ARHC, to introduce the panel and moderate this session. Over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Janet. Hi, I'm as Janet says, I'm Andrew Chitty. So I'm the Challenge Director at UK Research and Innovation, running a series of programs around technology innovation and innovation in the creative industries. And over the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen a great increase in interest around the intersection of the creative industries and technology, and what that means for innovation and growth in the sector. And in many ways, CreaTech as a conference has been at the heart of that, exploring that boundary and those interactions. Now, the pandemic period has, if anything, re-emphasized some ways the dependency of the creative industries on digital and real-time technologies, whether that's in production or in distribution or in consumption. And it's accelerated the development of new revenue streams and business models and new engagement channels, which are dependent on this interaction between technology and the creative industries. So we're seeing a lot more use of the term CreaTech as a way of describing this dynamic interaction between essentially advanced computing technologies and the creative industries. So what I think we can learn in this session is thinking about how do we think about this fusion of technology and creative business? Is it a new way of looking at the creative industries, or is it an extension of the creative industry sector powered by technology? Or is this a completely new area, or new category, or a new sector even, that we should think about in its own right? Because I think the way that we think about it, the way we conceptualize CreaTech, determines what support, what incentives, or what interventions might be needed by policy actors or the fiscal environment to encourage the development of this really, really dynamic area. So to help us navigate CreaTech and bringing the very latest findings from their research, we have 3 expert panelists with 3 really interesting perspectives. So we have Juan Mateos-Garcia, who many of you may know is Director of Data Analytics at Nesta, and perhaps the premier data scientist working in the area of understanding this crossover. We have Maria Tangala, who's the co-founder of FilmChain, so that's a business perspective from a business entrepreneur who's definitely within this area. And then Martha Bloom, who's Research Fellow in Innovation in the Creative Industries at the University of Sussex, will be bringing us her perspective again, from the research side. So I'm going to hand over to Juan to start us and take us through the findings of this latest and really important work that's come out of Nesta and the Creative Industries Policy and Evidence Centre. So take it away, Juan.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Yeah, it's very exciting to be here to talk about this research we published on Monday, where we were basically mapping the CreaTech research and development landscape using data science methods. And obviously, the fact that we're using data science, machine learning, makes it very exciting for us to, I guess, be talking about this research at cogX, which is a conference all about AI, machine learning, and very exciting techniques like that. In terms of the context for the project, I guess, very simply, we have CreaTech, these applied combinations of creativity and technology. And, it's obviously an area with which, as Andrew touched on, has big commercial and expressive potential, but also might have increased complexity. It requires combining different disciplines. It creates maybe new types of risks, and therefore we might find a situation where some of these commercial and expressive opportunities are not realized. And obviously, policy might have a role to play in avoiding that and making sure we capture the value of CreaTech. So basically, obviously, if we're going to have policies, we need these policies to be very based on the best possible evidence. And this is what we're trying to create through this project with PEC and also with our colleagues in TechNation, who have also been researching this area and published a couple of reports about this very recently. The questions that we're interested in are things such as how is CreaTech activity evolving, where is it happening, and what is the impact? And here in this session, I'm going to be talking about the first output from this analysis, which is going to be focusing on publicly funded research around creative technologies. What have we done? Basically, we have taken data from the Gateway to Research, which is a repository of research and innovation grants from UK Research and Innovation and Innovate UK and research councils. And basically, this contains 110,000 grants. And what we have done is use a variety of machine learning and data science methods, such as fuzzy matching, supervised machine learning, topic modeling, to identify 2,500 projects, 4,000 organizations. And there you have the link to the first report that was published this week, if you want to get into some of the technical detail. And obviously, if people want to discuss the specifics of the methodology we have used in the project, very happy to talk about that in the Q&A. Basically, out of these projects, we have, I guess, extracted 5 categories of CreaTech. One is content and media. And by the way, this is just the categories, and then I'm just giving a randomly drawn example of a project in each of the categories. We have content and media, which is very much related to audio, video, immersive, computer graphics, motion graphics, things like those. Data and AI is projects that are basically focused on the use of data, artificial intelligence, machine learning. Creative services, which are projects that are using technology in areas like design, architecture, advertising. Computing, projects which are a bit more focused, I guess, on development of computing infrastructure and things like simulations and stuff like that. And then blockchain. And as you can see from the examples, they really illustrate the variety of projects where we are seeing creative technology being developed, using augmented reality to teach baby sign language to deaf and hearing preschoolers, using machine learning for body shape recognition, redesigning offices to make them more inclusive, formal verification of computational science models, digitizing food supply chains. It's an incredibly wide set of projects and a lot of innovation going on. And actually, we find that more than half of the organizations involved in projects involving creative technologies are actually in sectors outside of the creative industries, which suggests that CreaTech, in addition of creating opportunities for creative firms and growth in creative industries, might also be a really great channel for knowledge exchange and making other industries more productive through the adoption of these technologies. Going into the findings, I guess the first finding is simply looking at the evolution of activity in CreaTech overall, as well as all of its segments. And this is what this is showing, is simply over time, how many projects do we see in different categories. And I guess the really interesting thing that we see is that in last year, basically between 2019 and 2020, we see what was like a progressive increase in CreaTech activity suddenly booming, and the share of all research projects involving CreaTech grows by 50% between 2019 and 2020. And something that's quite interesting is that we find that the CreaTech projects in 2020 are 4 times more likely to mention COVID-19 in their descriptions than non-CreaTech projects, suggesting that all of these different technologies that comprise CreaTech are playing a particularly important role in tackling the pandemic. Something quite interesting that we have done in the analysis, and as a data scientist, this is the kind of thing I'm almost like intrinsically interested in, is in machine learning to be able to say to what disciplines do different projects relate. And then basically what we do is analyze whether a project is very focused on a single discipline or is focused in many different disciplines in order to calculate their interdisciplinarity. And this is what this chart is showing. As you go to the right, you have increasing interdisciplinarity. And the vertical axis is simply showing the share of projects in CreaTech, which is blue, and non-CreaTech accounted by that category. And what this is simply showing is that CreaTech projects are underrepresented in the area of low interdisciplinarity over here, and they are overrepresented in the area of high interdisciplinarity. In other words, CreaTech projects are combining more disciplines, and obviously that's what makes them exciting, but that might also create challenges in terms of getting them funded. The third finding is around the geography. So we have mapped the location of organizations that participate in CreaTech projects. And this is what this map is showing, is simply number of CreaTech participations in different regions, different parts of the UK. And this is simply looking at the share of all activity accounted by different areas. It's important to flag up that we are using a logarithmic scale in the map because activity is really, really concentrated in London. So actually, if we don't use a logarithmic scale, it's very hard to see anything. We find that London's share of CreaTech is a third higher than non-CreaTech. Actually, the top locations, the locations account for 65% of CreaTech research participations. They only account for 49% of non-CreaTech creative participations, suggesting a great degree of concentration of activity in a few places, which obviously could raise concerns if we want to have CreaTech not just driving growth and innovation in a small number of locations, but doing that more broadly. And this is obviously a very big policy question going forward. And finally, and this is a bit of a sneak preview, something that I'm also very excited about is we are starting to explore the structure of CreaTech research networks. So it's kind of like figure, simply what it's showing is a research collaboration network where for the content and media CreaTech segment, then the nodes are organizations, the connections between them are collaborations. And basically what we are planning to do in the next step of the project is to analyze the structure of these networks in order to identify opportunities for collaboration, where there might be gaps, and where there might be fragilities. For example, in this network, it's quite interesting that here at the center is the BBC, which is like super active in all of CreaTech research, but especially in content and media. And obviously that's very exciting and suggests the BBC is playing a role as an anchor institution for CreaTech, but also could make this network fragile if the BBC changes what it's doing. You know, what happens to these networks? How do we ensure that the network is made resilient so it's not reliant on a single institution for its success? So yeah, these were just like a couple of like highlights. Obviously, the report gets into much more detail and has additional findings. I guess my conclusions are that growing levels of activity seem to in CreaTech seem to have been bolstered by COVID-19, and we are seeing evidence that the research system is supporting CreaTech. A lot of disciplinary crossover, as I said, but could this create barriers to funding, say if projects fall through the cracks of different funders, and then also a high level of geographical concentration. And obviously the question here is how do we avoid all of the value being captured by a few places, and instead we see CreaTech activity happening more broadly across the UK. And just to conclude, this is just the report we published is the first step, and we are continuing our analysis in the coming months. We're going to be studying business activity. We're going to be looking at how we can model outcomes of creative projects and CreaTech ventures. And also there's the business survey that is going to be run by colleagues at Sprue, and Martha is going to be talking about this later, which really use the list of companies that we are creating through the analysis we are doing here as a starting point for a business survey, asking them about a variety of things that Martha will be talking about. And yeah, I think that's it from me. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the other presentations and to your questions later on.
Fantastic. Thank you, Juan. And out there, if you're watching this, please do, if you've got any questions for Juan, please just submit them and I'll try and pull those out when we've all heard from all three speakers. Fascinating results there. I was particularly struck by the geography result around this growing, exciting area, that so many of those areas that have a superabundance of CreaTech projects are in the south of England, with only Edinburgh really is an exception to that. So I think there's huge amounts of insight to mine from this ongoing work. We'll move to Martha, who, as Juan mentioned, is a researcher at SPRU at the University of Sussex. So Martha, hopefully that you're ready for this slight quick jump in the order. Perhaps we could hear from your research and then we'll return to Maria and the business perspective as soon as we can.
Yep, that's fine. I'm assuming that everyone can hear me all right, unless I hear anything else. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to speak on this panel. Really excited to be here. So Juan's presented his findings from this exciting new bit of research, and I work with Juan and others at PEC, the Creative Industries Policy and Evidence Centre, and I'm also based at the Science Policy Research Unit, or SPRU, at the University of Sussex, where I have for a number of years been researching this idea of fusion, so the fusion of creative and technological skills or knowledges or talent. And so that's broadly what I'm going to be speaking about today, and then sort of wrapping up by saying a little bit more about the PEC's research agenda moving forward around CreaTech. So why is this fusion of creative and technological skills so productive? Why are we all so interested in it? Well, quite a number of years ago now, colleagues at SPRU and Nesta ran this big study, and that they found that firms who fuse creative and technological skills have higher employment and sales growth. They are more likely to bring radical innovations to market, and they are more productive than firms who use only one of these skill sets. So there's something really magical about bringing together creativity and technology. And why is this? Well, my research, I categorize this as because of the productive tension between knowledge domains, which generates innovation. What do I mean by that? Well, I guess it's about expanding the repertoire of knowledge that can be drawn upon. So expanding the different ideas, concepts, but also the different ways of viewing the world, and different approaches to learning and problem solving, different approaches to innovation, that bringing together people with different skill sets or from different backgrounds can create this productive tension between knowledge domains, out of which new ideas can emerge. So that productive tension isn't always entirely productive, right? So the general sort of consensus in a lot of the literature talks about this conflict that can arise when you have groups of technologists and groups of creatives trying to work alongside each other. And often this is sort of characterized as hipsters versus geeks, or lovies versus boffins, right? There are these two groups of people, and those two groups of people working together can be quite problematic. They might speak different languages. They might not understand each other's viewpoints. And not only that, but to overcome those sort of barriers to collaboration, to knowledge exchange, can take quite a lot of additional resources. So as part of my research, I looked at a whole bunch of Innovate UK funded collaborative projects, collaborative R&D projects. And I found that these collaborative R&D projects, which involved firms from the creative industries and from science and technology areas, took longer and were more expensive than collaborative projects involving firms from within the same industry, right? So that really indicates that it can require additional resources to undertake R&D projects that really sort of sit at the intersection between knowledge domains. And that's possibly why I also found that the majority of these projects involve large firms, that there isn't as much engagement in these inter-industry collaborations between creative and technology or science-based firms from SMEs. SMEs sort of appear to be slightly missing from this picture. I think one of the things we'll speak about later is the extent to which that's because of the sort of the nature of the data Innovate UK funded, and whether there are actually a lot of SMEs sort of feeding in through other ways is a really interesting question. But that's sort of what the data's saying so far. And then what emerges from this is the key role for what I call knowledge brokers. So it's individuals or organizations who have both creative and technological training. So people who are able to span the boundaries between these different worlds, between high-tech firms, between this world of high-tech, and between creative and also cultural industries as well. And so this can be individuals, people who can bring together, for example, different departments within an organization, or they can be organizations that can help facilitate collaboration networks. But they're a really key resource in making these CreaTech projects, CreaTech firms, or sort of fusion to make that productive. So I'm trying to I know we have quite a range of audience members, so I wanted to give a few sort of takeaways from my research and offer a little bit of advice for businesses, for funders, and for policymakers. So for businesses, I think it's really crucial to be seeking and recruiting employees with these cross-disciplinary skills, which can be tricky. There aren't that many of them out there. So if you can't recruit those employees, then train and retrain staff in areas outside of their specialisms. Also to develop systems, standards, and infrastructures to facilitate cross-disciplinary teamwork. For funders, I think there needs to be a greater promotion of inter-industry collaboration projects. So the projects that I studied were actually very much in the minority. And then improve systems for assessing businesses which fall out of traditional categories. Businesses which may not be entirely creative industries, entirely high-tech, to find systems for assessing these types of businesses that could otherwise fall through the cracks. And then better access to funding for CreaTech SMEs and SMEs and collaboration projects. And then I think for me, almost the most important point arising from my research is both to have an equal focus on the creative side and the technology side of CreaTech, that, without the creative part, it's just technology, but also to have a greater support for STEAM skills development and training. So this narrative of STEAM education, I think, is really helpful. I think we definitely need STEM skills without a doubt, but art skills are equally as important to that, to the future of work, especially in this sector. So I know we're a bit short on time. I'll try and wrap up quite quickly, but to give you an idea of the PEC's research agenda for CreaTech moving forward. So as Juan mentioned, myself, colleagues at Sprue and Nesta and the PEC are going to be conducting a large-scale business survey of CreaTech firms in the UK. We're going to be looking at the R&D practices of these companies, looking at barriers and enablers to growth and to innovation, and how they're currently engaging with funding and the funding system. We expect to have results towards the end of the year in order to establish a baseline of operations in the area, to identify avenues for focused investigation, and in order to advise industry and policymakers about necessary interventions and best practice. So the aim of the bit of work really is to continue to develop this evidence base to harness CreaTech as an exciting, innovative and productive exemplar of future work and growth. So that's all from me. Thanks very much for having me. And I suppose I'll be passing back over to Andrew.
Yes, thanks, Martha. What I'm going to do is, rather than pick up on some of the many fascinating points in that, is try and switch straight back to Maria, who I think has solved her technical issues and is back with us. Hi, Maria. So, how does this feel from a business point of view? That's the key as a CreaTech business.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and apologies for earlier. It's good to be back. So thank you everyone for joining me today and for inviting me to talk about a founder's perspective. So I'm the co-founder of FilmChain. At FilmChain, we modernize payments in film and TV, from viewers such as yourselves to content creators. We're absolutely honored to have a combination of great innovators from Imperial College London, Innovate UK, deep tech labs like Creative Destruction Lab and so on, but also from the creative industries. So we're seeing how film and TV stakeholders, producers, financiers, sales agents, talent, they don't know how much they're owed. Participation management is so complex. We're seeing how payments are delayed for years and sometimes never reach the right owners. Companies are struggling with manual, opaque, and error-prone systems. It's incredible to see how people are still paid in checks and they cannot verify their entitlements. And that is essentially putting businesses out of business because they don't know when they should expect royalties, and that breaks a lot of the trust. That's why at FilmChain we built this fintech solution that addresses these problems. And that is a fintech solution with verification mechanisms in place that replace the suboptimal and manual processes that exist so far. So at FilmChain, we offer instant access to money, reports, and data. The system is transparent and auditable, and it unifies the management of entitlements and rights. We offer, on top of that, analytics and performance insights. So our products, we call ourselves a digital CAM, a collection account management. We digitized the royalties dashboard and we defined the recoupment schedule with all of the attributes for countless beneficiaries. There are tens, sometimes hundreds of beneficiaries that need to recoup money. The transactions tab essentially notifies every participant of the incoming gross receipts, and the participants are able to verify. The wallet is the individual user's secure visualization of their own payments and what they have withdrawn. The rights tracker is where participants can add, track, and manage their sales. And in analytics, we show rich insights, data visualizations, and we're working on financial predictions as well. So the technology that we're using, it's a combination of phenomenal technologies out there, and simply having the ability to use these technologies, I don't think that such a product would have had space and adoption 4 years ago in the creative industries. So for them, the securely protected cloud-based software system that we use essentially interfaces between our platform and our banking partners. The platform has both the client functionalities, but we built entirely all of our admin panel as well. With the blockchain, a buzzword, but we absolutely fell in love with this technology back in 2017. We don't use any cryptocurrency at all, but we replicate the money distribution process on a private Ethereum blockchain. So with that, we create an immutable history of payments. For every incoming gross receipt, we record it, and then we announce it. And the participants can go on their dashboards and verify, but all of that is also on this extra layer of Ethereum where we ensure that, the truthfulness and the transparency. On top of the smart contracts, we also built NFTs for participants' ownership. No two films look alike. That's why with the participation management system, you have sales from all over the world for so many sources of income, and every single participant has their own ownership tracked with all of the attributes. And secondary markets are also on our roadmap. With the analytics, of course, we measure, we collect, we analyze all of the incoming gross receipts, all of the countries, all of the sources of distribution, but we also perform ML and AI explorations. So based on accrued royalties, we're also looking at 12 to 18 months predictions. We are very thankful for all of the UK open banking proposal initiatives out there. So that's why we're able to integrate with Wise, with Tink, with Stripe. And as I said, simply how the fintech sector has grown so much in the previous years, such a product would have not been available in the shape it is today 4 years ago. And I also would like to talk a bit about my experience as an entrepreneur, which I think is really, really important. So we're essentially bridging the creative industries. I come from a producer's background. My co-founder, she's a technologist, and we are seeing how at the moment in terms of the funding for an entrepreneur's journey, for a company that needs to grow, that needs to scale, that needs to acquire global customers, it is still very challenging. We had a combination of grants from UK Trained Investment, then pre-seed investment, then we've been awarded a significant Innovate UK grant, and then we had our seed investment as well. We would like to recommend the UK funding landscape to integrate more seamlessly. I think that from all of our experiences, the VCs were not aware of the highly competitive selection process, how hard it is to get Innovate UK funding. And I'm sure that my fellow panelists here can confirm that. The VC partners and associates should be taken as judges for these grant selection. And have something like, bridging through joint events like demo days where companies can showcase what they have built throughout their programs. The aim is to break down silos between the public funding sector and the private sector, because the media and CreaTech have huge market opportunities. In our total available market, we're talking about 60,000 productions generating over 267 billion annually. That's a huge market sizing, and people should be aware of that, because growing and scaling in the sector is very ambitious, and at the same time a huge opportunity for both private and public financiers to join. Thank you very much. Looking forward to your questions.
Okay, thanks, Maria. Really interesting in that you've emphasised that how the conditions have changed over the last few years, both in terms of the acceptance of the idea of a CreaTech company, but also I think in the benefits that your kind of approach brings to your customers. I recognise a lot of what you say about the need to integrate the funding landscape. I think we've been starting to experiment within UKRI about matching private investment and innovation grants, and I think there's much more to do there. We inevitably, because this is so interesting, are running out of time. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to pose one question to you all, and then I'm going to take one of the really interesting questions that have come up from the audience. So the question to us all is, what you've mapped out, I mean, you've all said this is a fantastic market opportunity, it's a fantastic opportunity for the UK. So which things should we be stimulating? Should we be stimulating greater collaboration between big companies and SMEs of different kinds, from the tech sector, from the creative industries? Should we be stimulating conditions for new CreaTech firms to be established and to scale? Or should we be promoting the adoption of CreaTech products and services? Come on, who wants to go first? It is possible to say a combination of the above.
Yeah, no, actually, you go, Martha.
I was going to say, yes, I think a combination of the above. I think perhaps less so the last one. I mean, I think I don't know the extent to which we need greater promotion of those products. I think that they're doing pretty well already, right? I think that it really is about promoting CreaTech firms, very much so about promoting these collaborations across boundaries, because through those collaborations, there's a potential for spin-off companies. And I think for me, the key thing really is skills, right? And so that both sort of skills development, the whole from sort of secondary through to further education, higher education, but then also training within the workplace training, because it's about having that pipeline of talent coming through. And then if you're also encouraging the businesses and encouraging the collaborations, then that's where people can learn and hone their skills and then move, you know, sort of through across industries as well.
Juan, you wanted to?
I was going to say something very similar to Marta, so I don't think I have a lot to add to that observation. That is a combination of all of these things and making sure that things don't fall through the cracks of the research system, innovation, and then entrepreneurship and skills.
So, in a way, CreaTech thinking, conceptualizing this area of CreaTech helps us make those kind of choices and hopefully to come up with a kind of integrated kind of response that and better funding landscape that Maria's advocating, do you think?
In my view, it's also about getting more people from the creative industries excited about starting businesses. At the moment, we are seeing and we're talking with like budding producers or people who I have identified real problems, and they don't know where to start with setting up a business. And then they just try to identify the funding landscape, as I also kind of mentioned, in order to see how they can get kind of a sustainable business up and running. And the more this message is blasted out there, the more you would have experts from the industry addressing problems in the industry with tech solutions.
Okay, great. We could have talked about this for much longer, I suspect, and I'm sure we will do again. It's great. You can find the research that that Martha and Juan have published. If you want to explore this more, I'd like to thank all three of you for really fascinating presentations, and I'm now going to hand back to Janet. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Andrew, Juan, Martha, and Maria, for such a fascinating session. Your research is music to my ears. It's so helpful in enhancing understanding of the definition of CreaTech, demonstrating the value of the fusion of creative and technological talent and skills, and making the case for greater support for STEAM education, which I think we should take back to our creative careers colleagues on the Creative Industries Council. I loved your finding that CreaTech is a great channel for making other industries more productive too. This is the year of providing the evidence base from which to develop a cohesive and integrated growth plan for UK CreaTech. We look forward to working with you in taking the CIC CreaTech programme forward and breaking down silos between public sector funding and the private sector. Thanks so much for doing this project. Now, looking forward, 12 noon, we're back here on the CreaTech stage with another fascinating session, looking forward to what the Olympics of the future might look like when CreaTech gets involved with it. And in the time between now and then, I'd like to push everybody who's been listening to this fascinating session today to check out CreaTech Ones to Watch. There's a booth about that in the virtual expo at cogX. It's a call for companies, projects, collaborations to self-select, to get involved in a CIC program to celebrate CreaTech in action. And there are only 2 weeks left to nominate yourself. We're looking to actually celebrate 100 different business entities in September and for the rest of the year. So please do find out more. It's free to get involved, and we'd love you to do so. See you all at 12 noon.